By the time the laughter softened and the whiskey burned to a pleasant hum in their veins, the night had begun to take on a slower rhythm.
Oh,
Jules stretched out on the couch, lazily humming along with the record player.
oh.
Benji had curled up in a corner, his head tilted back, fast asleep with his hoodie pulled up. The bar felt hushed now, intimate, as though the world outside the rain-slicked windows had disappeared. Evelyn sat at the edge of the couch, the warmth of the whiskey still glowing inside her. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed this laughter. Without expectation, conversation without judgment, company that felt unforced. She could almost pretend that she belonged here, like she'd stumbled into a small world that had been waiting for her all along. Caleb rose quietly, walked over to the record player, and thumbed through a stack of vinyl. The scratchy sound of a needle settling filled the room, followed by the rich, tender voice of Sam Cooke. "You send me, darling. You—" The music was low, slow, timeless. Caleb turned, and Evelyn felt his eyes on her. He crossed the room with unhurried steps and stopped in front of her, extending a hand. "Dance with me." Her breath caught. It had been so long since anyone had asked her that. So long since she'd let herself be pulled into something so simple, so vulnerable. "I haven't danced in years," she admitted softly. "Neither." Have one, his mouth curved into the faintest smile. "But I don't want this night to end." Something in his voice disarmed her. She placed her hand in his, and he helped her to her feet. The space between the couches became their dance floor. His hand rested at her waist, steady but gentle, and her other hand found his shoulder almost instinctively. They swayed slowly, following no pattern but the music. Evelyn's head tilted toward his chest, the scent of soap and whiskey and cedar surrounding her, for the first time in what felt like years. She let her body relax against someone else's. She didn't think about how it looked or whether she was doing it right. She just moved, letting the moment hold her. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them was rich, not empty, like every unsaid word was understood anyway. When the song ended, neither of them let go. They stood there, holding on, swaying to music that had already faded. Finally, Evelyn lifted her face to look at him. Her voice came out small, fragile. "Is this a mistake? Feels like the opposite," he whispered. His gaze held hers, steady and patient. The world tilted, as though something inside her wanted to close the space, to bridge the distance with a kiss. She leaned in, barely, before the weight of reality crashed back in. Her chest tightened. She stepped back, her hand slipping from his. I can't," she said quickly. Caleb's brow furrowed. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." Her throat felt tight. "It's not you. It's just—" She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm leaving Portland. In 2 weeks. Work transfer, new city, new life. I've already signed everything. I can't. I shouldn't." The words broke in her mouth, spilling the truth she'd been holding all night. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly. "That explains why you look like someone bracing to disappear." She let out a shaky laugh, tears stinging her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. Didn't want to hurt myself either. That's why I almost didn't stay tonight." Caleb stepped closer, not too close, just enough so his presence filled the space beside her. "You don't have to protect me, and you don't have to pretend this didn't mean something." Her breath caught. She turned her head toward him, their faces inches apart. "It did. It means everything. That's the problem." For the first time all night, her voice cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek before she could stop. Caleb reached out gently, brushing it away with his thumb. "Then maybe don't call it a problem," he said quietly. "Maybe just call it what it is." The morning after, Evelyn sat by her apartment window, coffee cooling in her hands. The rain had stopped, but the city outside looked blurred, as if the world hadn't quite woken up. She couldn't stop replaying the night in her mind, the whiskey, the laughter, the record player, the slow dance. The way Caleb had looked at her like she wasn't broken at all. She told herself she should let it go. One night, a beautiful, unexpected night that didn't need to be more. She would leave in 2 weeks. It was safer this way. And yet, the ache in her chest wouldn't ease. By late afternoon, her decision was made. She needed closure. She needed to say goodbye, to thank them, to step back into the hollow oak one last time before she tucked the memory away like a pressed flower in a book. When she pushed the door open, the familiar scent of citrus and oak wrapped around her. The place was quiet, not yet open for the evening rush. And Caleb was there, standing behind the bar as though he'd been waiting. He looked up, and the steadiness in his gaze stole her breath. "You weren't just passing through," he said, as if he already knew what she had come to say. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I didn't want to. I didn't want to hurt anyone, least of all you. You didn't." His voice was calm. "Sure, but don't lie to yourself and say this didn't mean something." Her eyes filled, the tears she'd held back spilling over. It meant everything. Caleb stepped out from behind the bar, closing the distance between them. His voice was low, steady. "Then let's not waste it. 2 weeks is time. Maybe not forever, maybe not promises. But it's enough for moments. Real ones." Her breath hitched. "And then what?" "Then we'll see," he said softly. "But right now, I don't want to think about goodbyes. I just want to think about tonight. About us." She closed her eyes, the weight in her chest loosening as she finally let herself nod. And for the first time in years, Evelyn chose to step into Love-a-Vine, if it came with borrowed time. The days that followed those 2 weeks became a collection of nights Evelyn would carry forever. Every evening after hours, she found herself back at the Hollow Oak. They danced to records no one else played anymore. They sat at the staff table, long after the lights dimmed, talking about everything and nothing her childhood summers in Oregon. His dream of opening his own bar one day, Jules' relentless matchmaking antics, Benji's quiet songs. And between all of it, she and Caleb carved out moments just for themselves. A brush of hands behind the counter, a whispered secret in the back room, a kiss shared in the soft glow of candlelight. The city outside went on as usual. Deadlines still waited, boxes still needed to be packed. But inside those walls, time bent differently. Each night was a reminder that love didn't always have to last forever to matter. Sometimes all it took was one night. Sometimes a goodbye wasn't an ending but a beginning you hadn't planned for. On her last night in Portland, Evelyn stood with Caleb on the quiet sidewalk outside the Hollow Oak. The rain had started again, soft and steady. She looked up at him, her heart breaking in full all at once. "I don't know what happens next." Caleb brushed wet strands of hair from her face. "Then let's not decide tonight. Let's just promise not to forget." She nodded, tears mixing with rain. "I couldn't, even if I tried." They kissed beneath the glow of the street lamp, a kiss that carried both ending and beginning. And when Evelyn walked away, suitcase in hand, she knew this wasn't the last chapter. It was simply the first of a story still being written. The streets of Portland were slick with rain that Friday night, the kind that fell in soft sheets. Not violent, but steady enough to blur the neon lights reflected in puddles along the sidewalk. Evelyn Harper's heels clicked softly against the wet pavement as she walked with no real destination. She should have been heading home. She should have been taking off her coat, slipping into pajamas, and forgetting about yet another date that had gone nowhere. But something inside her resisted the quiet of her apartment. The silence there was heavy, the kind that pressed against her chest until it felt hard to breathe. So when her gaze landed on a small wooden sign carved with the words, "The Hollow Oak," hanging above a narrow door tucked between a used bookstore and a sleepy cafe, she stopped. The glow from the inside spilled out in a soft amber hue, promising warmth. She pushed the door open. The bar smelled faintly of citrus and oak, with hints of whiskey that lingered in the air. Worn leather stools lined the bar top, each one holding the creases of countless late-night conversations. Dim pendant lamps hung low, their light golden and forgiving. At the far end of the bar, 3 customers sat close together, laughing in hushed tones over empty glasses. The rest of the place was quiet, nearly still. Behind the counter stood a man she noticed immediately. He was tall, lean but strong, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His dark hair curled slightly where it was damp from the rain, and when he glanced up at her, his eyes carried the kind of quiet steadiness that made people feel seen even when they wanted to hide. "Kitchen's closed," he said gently, wiping down the bar. "But the bar's still open." Evelyn hesitated only a second before nodding. "Just a glass of red. Whatever you think is decent." He reached for a bottle, poured her a Sarah, and slid it across the polished wood. She took the glass, her fingers brushing his briefly, then settled onto the stool nearest the door. The first sip warmed her immediately, but it was the silence that began to soothe her most. It wasn't empty silence, it was safe. She stared into her glass, trying not to replay her date from earlier. The forced small talk, the way his eyes had drifted toward the waitress more than once, the quick, awkward hug outside the restaurant before he vanished into an Uber. Evelyn had smiled, had said goodnight, and had walked away before the disappointment had time to sting. But now it sat with her like a shadow. The man behind the bar, Caleb, as she would later learn, watched her. Not intrusively, but with the kind of perception that picked up on small things. The way she exhaled too heavily. The way her shoulders curved inward as though she was trying to fold into herself. He didn't ask questions. He just refilled her. Glass when it dipped low, letting the space between them hold what she wasn't ready to say, and then a soft click echoed through the room. The front door locked automatically behind her. Closing time. The laughter at the far end faded as the last customer slipped out, waving goodnight to Caleb and tossing casual goodbyes toward the staff. Evelyn hadn't moved. She wasn't sure. Why? Something about leaving felt heavier than staying, Caleb noticed. He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned slightly against the bar. "Want to stay a while? We usually hang out after close. Staff only thing, but you're welcome." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. She glanced around. A woman with bright red lipstick and tattooed arms jewels, as Evelyn would soon learn, was stacking glasses with an easy laugh. A younger man, maybe barely in his 20s, hummed softly to himself as he swept the floor. Benji, the barback. They moved like a small family, comfortable, familiar with each other's rhythms. "I don't want to intrude," Evelyn said softly. "You won't," Caleb replied. His smile was small, but real. Something inside her a tug she couldn't quite. Nay made her nod, just for a bit. The back room of the Hollow Oak felt even cozier than the front. It wasn't for customers. It was where the staff gathered, a mismatched space with old couches, a scratched wooden table, and vinyl records stacked haphazardly near a turntable. Someone lit a candle, its flame flickering against the wall. Jules poured whiskey into shot, glasses sliding one toward Evelyn. "House rule," she grinned. "It's first time back here. You drink with us." Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. "I'm not sure I should." "Not sure isn't a no," Jules teased. Evelyn lifted the glass. The whiskey burned, but in a way that felt oddly good, like it was burning through something tight in her chest. They talked. At first, Evelyn only listened. She listened to Jules' wild stories about customers who mistook the bar for a confessional. She listened to Benji hum old soul songs under his breath, sometimes breaking into shy laughter when teased. She watched. Caleb leaned back against the wall, listening more than speaking, his quiet presence steadying the room, and then, without meaning to, she began to share. She told him about her job in marketing, safe, predictable, but draining. She confessed how she sometimes dreamed of quitting to open a small flower shop, a place filled with color and fragrance instead of deadlines and endless emails. She admitted, almost too quietly, how loneliness had been creeping into her life. like fog soft, invisible, but suffocating all the same. The room grew gentle around her words. No judgment, no pity, just listening. "You don't seem like someone who should be lonely," Caleb said after a long silence. His voice was even, but something in his tone made Evelyn's chest tighten. She looked at him quickly, then away. "You don't know me. I'd like to," he said simply. The weight of that lingered. She felt the warmth rise in her cheeks, unsure what to say. Jules clapped her hands suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Truth or dare?" she announced, eyes sparkling as she looked at Evelyn. "Newcomers don't get off easy." Evelyn laughed, half protesting. "I don't even know the rules." "Easy. We ask, you choose. No boring answers." Jules leaned forward mischievously. "Truth or dare, Eve?" Evelyn hesitated, the corners of her mouth tugging upward. She hadn't laughed like this in weeks, maybe months. "Truth," she said finally. Jules smirked. "'Kay. What's one thing you've wanted to do lately but haven't had the courage?" "'Kay." The question caught her off guard. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward Caleb almost instinctively, then down at her hands. Her throat tightened. "Start over," she whispered. The room fell still for a moment. Then Jules smiled softly. "Less mischievous now, more tender. That's not as scary as you think. Sometimes all it takes is one night." Evelyn swallowed, her heart thudding. She looked at Caleb again, just for a moment. And in his eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw something steadier, something that made her believe maybe Jules was right. The night stretched on, filled with laughter, stories, dares too silly to refuse. But beneath it all, a quiet current hummed between Evelyn and Caleb, unspoken, uncertain, unavoidable, and when the clock ticked past 2 a.m., Evelyn realized she hadn't thought once about the man from earlier that evening. She hadn't thought about her string of failed dates or the heavy silence of her apartment. She thought only of here, this bar, its warmth, its feeling of being seen. But the question lingered in her chest like a secret. Was this just one night, or the beginning of something she didn't dare hope for?